And there are a bunch of seats here. Great. How you all doing? I'll start again. How you all doing? Are we excited? Yeah. We have a great evening, a list of amazing panelists. But I want to first thank you for coming to this evening's event. I'd like to give a few shout outs. Thank you to my fellow co-chair, Penny and Greg, and the host committee for their hard work in making this evening possible. Thank you also for the donors of this event, and specifically the Gotham sponsors, Peter Lewis, Bruce Ratner and family, Greg, David Winter, and Hamilton South of Standard Industries. I also want to thank the civic sponsors, Boaz Bagbag, Rudy Rappaport Blitzer, and all of her work here at Citizens Union. Nancy and Anthony Bowe, Chris Giglio, Gary Natalis, and the law firm of Kramer Levin, Marie Salerno, Joanne Wiley, and Eugene Kalin. So I'm a lifelong New Yorker, and if I have enough bourbon, you'll hear my Queen's accent. Now, I've long admired CU's work in advocating for honesty, transparency, and accountability, not only in City Hall, but up in Albany. Now, I became involved in Citizens Union after serving as a host to a Gotham Reformer event some 12 years ago. Now, over the years, I have been appreciative of and inspired by CU's critical work on such issues as voting rights, budget transparency, and anti-corruption reform. And each morning I get up, have my cup of coffee, and I read Gotham Gazette. Now, it gives you the latest on politics and policy making. Just a shout out to Ben and company for all their work on that. It's a must-read, highly recommended. They cover issues that no one else is covering. The Charter Revision Commission, and all sorts of intricacies that are important to the lives of New Yorkers. Now, this evening, we have a distinguished panel to discuss the power of political engagement, from citizens advocacy to serving in government. Now, the discussion will be facilitated by the amazing Brian Lehrer. I'm a big fan. Now, before we begin, I would like to introduce CU's new executive director, Betsy Getachew. She has a wealth of public service experience, as you all know, whether it's serving as New York City Public Advocate and head of the New York City Police Foundation and the New York Historical Society. Now, as a CU board member, I'm extremely appreciative for her leadership and commitment to CU's mission. Please join me in welcoming Betsy.
Well, that's a really nice introduction. It makes me feel like maybe I've been around since this place was founded in 1897. Well, anyway, I'm very pleased to be here. Excuse me. I've been at Citizens Union. One of my friends said, "What are you doing at Citizens United?" I said, "Excuse me." Yeah, right. No, over there. But anyway, I'm very pleased. I want to say that I have a wonderful board. I haven't gotten around to meeting all of them, but I do have to give a shout out to one person who's here. She's going to kill me, Judy Rappaport Blitzer. She's incredible. I mean, she keeps me honest. She bugs me all the time, but you know what? She's sensational. So, and the rest of the board is wonderful too. I have found a wonderful staff that we are trying very hard. It's a very small staff. We're about 9 people. And we are trying very hard to do a lot of interesting things. Probably our grasp is wider than our reachers, and our reach is wider than our grasp. Never mind. Anyway, I did want to say that, as you know, and as David said, Citizens Union, not say Citizens Union, Citizens Union has always been working towards reform, heavy reform. And in some things we've been successful, and others we have not been as successful. But one of the things that I've found is extremely interesting and something we need to branch out is voter participation. As you all probably know, in the last election, voter participation was abysmal. We have a voter participation project, and I plan to expand that with civic education. And my friend right here, DeNora, who runs something that is doing a lot of civic education, hopefully I'm going to partner with her and others in trying to expand civic education for our young people so that people will really feel involved and engaged and want to get involved in local government, because that's all where it starts. And finally, the other issue that we are going to work on is the census in 2020, because it is probably the most important thing for New York. One, it'll determine the number of representatives we have, and two, it'll determine the kind of money that we get back from Washington. But you'll hear more about that, not from me, but perhaps from some of my colleagues. Anyway, thank you all very much for coming. I want to say that this panel of wonderful people is really an absolute measure of exactly what we want to do in Citizens Union. So thank you all very much. And Penelope, where are you? Penelope, come up here. You're the chairman, one of the co-chairmen tonight, and take it away.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you all for coming tonight. We truly have a wonderful turnout. Before I introduce our moderator for the program, I would first like to say a few words about what I enjoy most in my involvement with Citizens Union. For me, Citizens Union's committees are its heart. Citizens Union has 3 committees, one covering the state, one covering municipal affairs, and a local candidates committee. These committees are the workhorses and think tanks of the organization, assisting the staff and the board in thinking through issues and conducting research. The local candidates committee is the committee that basically interviews local candidates right before elections and sends out pamphlets for all of us to read before we go to the polls. These committees are ones that any member of Citizens Union who cares about a topic in New York City or New York State, or that wants to get involved in interviewing local candidates, can participate in. So this, to my mind, those committees are a terrific way to get involved in the issues of the day. Now, I have the great fortune tonight of getting to introduce Brian Lehrer, who will be our moderator and special guest speaker tonight. Where did Brian go? Oh, there he is. Brian's voice, of course, needs no introduction. He is the host of the eponymous and award-winning Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC Public Radio. The show has been on the air a remarkable near 30 years. It has a winning formula. Brian interviews newsmakers and experts on current events and social issues, and audience members are able to dial in with questions and comments. Brian has interviewed guests ranging from Barack Obama, Mitch McConnell, and Cynthia Nixon to the authors Margaret Atwood and Junot Diaz. The New York Times has called Brian a master interviewer. Time magazine calls the program New York City's most thoughtful and informative talk show. What I myself most admire, though, about the show is the way Brian gets citizens involved in the issues of the day and gives them a voice through the column feature of the program. And so, without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I give you Brian Lehrer.
Thank you so much. And first, I want to thank the Citizens Union for inviting me and for your work in general. It's so important to a functioning democracy, something we can't take for granted these days, to have independent, truly nonpartisan civic groups with no axe to grind other than genuinely good government. So thank you for your work year in and year out. And this is a well-chosen topic for tonight by the Citizens Union at a time when the public on one level is unusually engaged and unusually inflamed. I think it means there is unusual opportunity right now for increasing the amount of advocacy and engagement, and good on you for seizing the moment. Although at the same time, as Betsy pointed out, voting, even the simplest act of engagement, voting, has been declining in New York. Coincidentally, WNYC just launched what we're calling a civic survey, asking people what kinds of civic engagement beyond voting they've done or are doing, and also importantly, what some of the hurdles are to becoming more involved. And we will ask you all on the panel that question tonight too. And some of the things we're hearing range from the existential, like lack of confidence that one person can make a difference, to the super practical, like who'll watch my kids. After Donald Trump was elected in 2016, and so many people in our area were in shock, we had political commentator Eleanor Cox on the show, and she said, and this is like 2 days after the election, that people should run for school board and other hyper-local offices. And I was surprised, like we just elected a race-baiting, P-word grabbing authoritarian to the most powerful position on the planet, and the word resistance had already come into new prominence, and you're telling me to run to be in charge of PS 169 and Middle School 158 in Queens? I use those because they're my alma maters. And she said, yes, you can't start by running for president. People have to flood the zone from the bottom up, and from her progressive politics standpoint, like the Republicans had done more effectively. So we sometimes see the power of political advocacy as empowering and sometimes enraging. Take NRA members or Tea Party activists or whatever example you like if you're on the progressive side, but it's often the squeaky political wheel that gets the grease, whether their cause is one you agree with or not. So advocacy and engagement. We have a great panel, so come on up. And let me just say that we will take questions from the audience after a while, so think about what you would like to ask, and we'll bring you in. So we have City Council Member Ritchie Torres with us. Is it true that you are the youngest member of the WNYC?
I've been on it, I think, 30 years, as long as you've been on it.
And he's already distinguishing himself with his work on the Housing Committee and now the Oversight Committee. And we have Rebecca Harari, Senior Vice President of the B'nai Zion Foundation and a former candidate for public office, a highly accomplished nonprofit founder, executive, and thought leader. And we have DeNora Getachew, the New York City Executive Director of Generation Citizen, an organization committed to providing civics education programs in our city schools. And we have Brette McSweeney, President of Eleanor's Legacy, the only statewide organization in New York focused on recruiting, training, and funding pro-choice Democratic women candidates. So I'm curious about everyone's political origin story. Like, just what first got you politically engaged, and what were one or two of your earliest advocacy experiences? Brette, want to start?
So what got me politically engaged? I come from a Boston Irish family with strong organized labor roots. My mother was a public school teacher, and my grandfather was a labor organizer for the Machinist Union in Boston. So I think it might be mother's milk. in that respect. But yet, I've earned my stripes because we spent some time and did some years in Texas and in suburban Philadelphia, where maybe a lot of people have taken buses to do some GOTV work. And one of my earliest memories is the ballot box in school, in my elementary school in suburban Philadelphia, and putting my lone vote in for Michael Dukakis, the pride of Massachusetts, in my elementary school. So those two were motivating factors. And then, of course, which might be a theme for me, when we lived in Texas, the great Governor Ann Richards was governor. And that was, even as a child, I still have the letter I wrote to her asking her how she got to be governor and what advice she had for my elementary school program. So those two strings, I think, definitely mother's milk, and then always just sort of in the conversation in my family.
Did you go around as a kid helping to get out the vote, like knocking on doors?
I do recall, and I'll look to my parents in the front row here, I do recall the car, I think there was a car that my father drove that had a speaker, you know, that sort of like calling people, calling people to get out the vote, for sure. I ran for office on city for student council. My motto was vote for Brette, she has red hair. I knew then that voters needed a short, direct message that they could take with them to the voting booth and remember. So I think I walked the walk that I preached to women all across New York. Yeah.
I remember when I first heard the term GOTV, I thought, gosh, there's a politics channel I don't know about? DeNora, how about you?
And thank you, Citizens Union, for having me here, and such an honor, Brian, to hear you pronounce my name correctly and to recognize me, so that's awesome. My story is, like the story of many of the young New Yorkers that we educate in classrooms around the city. So Generation Citizens, a 9-year-old national nonprofit focused on getting civics education back into schools. We teach young people action civics, so it's not Schoolhouse Rock, it's not a bill on Capitol Hill. It is how can they take, affect change by directly engaging with government through a semester-based class. And so I was a young pregnant teen. My son is embarrassed right now, but he's sitting in the audience. He's 21, he just graduated from college. And I launched my first advocacy campaign as a pregnant teen when I was being encouraged to transfer to an alternative high school here in New York City for pregnant girls, because being pregnant was a distraction to my peers. Even though I was on the honor roll, I was high achieving and high functioning. And so with the support of my mom, who's also here, I launched a campaign to push back on that. And so, unbeknownst to me, didn't know Generation Citizen existed, because it didn't exist then, but not talk about change, but actually lead it by advocating that I could stay in my home school, graduate on time with honors with my peers, and walk across the stage with my then less than 1-year-old. And so, fast forward to my career, my first job out of law school as a baby lawyer, I like to say, was when Chris Quinn was the Speaker of the City Council. And I was asked, well, what committee would you like to work with at the City Council? And the choices were education and governmental operations. And unbeknownst to me, I became the democracy nerd that I am now. Before that was sexy and in vogue, by going with the Governmental Operations Committee and working to revamp the city's campaign finance laws and others. So I was able to connect the dots of that civic engagement moment as a young teen to what it meant to advocate for good government and be a proud alum of Citizens Union, where I worked shortly thereafter to be able to continue that work.
Do you remember what it was about government operations that first made you think, gosh, that would be more interesting than education?
So in law school, took a lot of classes around election reform and advocacy, and realized I actually could find my passion by understanding the nooks and crannies of government. And so random agencies that many of us don't know well, the Board of Standards of Appeals and the Campaign Finance Board, I got to be in the nuts and bolts of how do they operate, how are they spending government money. Was the council of the committee at the time when New York was the holdout state to implement the Help America Vote Act. And so really working with the disability community and communities of color citywide, back when Councilmember Torres was a council member, to be able to make sure that New York City and New York State were compliant with the law. And so it made my heart flutter in a good government way, and I've been able to stick with it throughout the rest of my career.
Rebecca?
Well, thank you. I think I'm the oldest, longest married. I'm married longer than you've been on the radio and than you were even born. So I might be your resident senior citizen up here, but my first real touch, or when I first really fell in love with politics and government was about 18 years ago. I was working to found my first nonprofit, Imagine Academy for Autism. We realized in Brooklyn, where I was living at the time, that there was a growing rise in autism, and we needed a school. We did not have a good school in our area. And I was really coming across a lot of stumbling blocks. I could not get to where I needed to go to get the school open. So I made an appointment. Somebody suggested make an appointment with your local political official. And I made an appointment with Assemblywoman Rhoda Jacobs at the time. She was wonderful. She really listened to everything we had to say. And before I knew it, she was really working hard to open doors for us, getting us the right legal help, getting us in front of the Board of Education, helping us to really form all the legal obstacles that we needed to get done. She helped us get it done. And I realized, wow, here's a person who really does care about the people that are living in her district. She really cares. She put herself out for us. She came with us to meetings. She spoke on our behalf. She showed up at all of our events. She was there for us. And I said, this is somebody that I can admire. This is somebody that I can really care about. And because I knew that she cared about us. And sure enough, within 1 year, we were open. And we were open. We had 12 kids in our first year, and by the second year, we had more than 50 kids. We are now an 18-year-old organization, school, and we are a model school in the country for autism. And I really do credit Rhoda Jacobs for that and for helping us. And since then, I have always been in love with politics, and I thought about running many years ago for city council, many years ago, but then when Mayor Bloomberg negotiated his third term, all of the other city council members also got to have a third term, so it wasn't the right time to run. So I waited. And then about 2.5 years ago, I was asked to run for New York State Assembly. And I ran, and it was an incredible experience. I really enjoyed every minute of it for the same reasons why I fell in love with government to begin with. And that is because I understood that as a political leader or as somebody in government, we really do, and all of us do, whether we're citizens or we're elected, we all have an opportunity to help each other. It doesn't matter what party we're in. It doesn't matter how old we are. It doesn't matter what our socioeconomic background is. None of those things matter. What matters is helping each other and looking past all of the divisiveness. And it's for that reason that I ran again a second time, and I ran for city council, and it was hard work. It's very hard work, but it's worth it, and it's fun, and I enjoyed every minute of it, and so there's my story.
What's the intersection or the connection between your education work and your political work? Does one feed the other? What's the connection or interaction between your nonprofit education work and your political work? Do they feed each other, or are they two separate interests?
No, they're very connected. The reason for that is because, well, essentially nonprofit work is, as you all know, you're trying to help people that maybe cannot help themselves, or they need support in order to accomplish their mission or their goal. The same thing is true in government. All of us, and I'm sure our councilman will agree, that as an elected official, we are here to represent and to help our constituents in any way that they need help. And I think in that sense, the reason I chose to run for office was to try to help even more people at a higher level, a larger level, and try to get more done with the same amount of effort and try to just help more people at the same time. So.
Thank you. Council member, your story.
Well, I actually had no interest in politics early in life. I'm embarrassed to say this, but I know early. Yes, I'm still mistaken for the council intern. I'm embarrassed to say I was actually a fan of professional wrestling growing up as a child. So that could be the origins, because there is a resemblance between the theatricality of politics and
That was fake sports before you got into fake news.
I think the governor, mayor, second governor has a WWF quality to it. But I had several entry points to politics. One was the CORE program. So through the CORE program, I secured an internship in the deputy mayor's office for economic development and rebuilding. when I was a sophomore in high school. And then at age 16, I became an intern for district manager, Jimmy Baca, a longtime district manager, who then ran for the city council. So I volunteered on his campaign. And then when he became a council member, I became an employee. And the issue that I championed in his office was public housing, because I was born and raised in public housing. And that's where I draw most of my inspiration. I think about my own life. You know, I grew up with a single mother, fatherless household. She would lurch from one low-wage job to the next, raising 3 children, a little more than minimum wage. Have 2 brothers in prison. I've struggled with depression. I have all these challenges, but the one constant that I had was a stable and affordable home. Right? I would not be where I am today were it not for public housing and the stability it gave me and my family. And so I went into public life with a mission that I have to preserve this critical safety net for the next generation of New Yorkers. But I never saw myself in politics. Believe it or not, I'm an introvert. And so when I began knocking on doors and speaking in public, I had to drink a glass of wine before every public engagement. And then I had something of a comical, so I was one of 9 candidates in the race. My leading opponent was a gentleman by the name of Joe Rivera, who had the same exact name as the outgoing incumbent. And he was leading people to believe that he was actually the council member. So if I had done nothing, he would have won on the sheer strength of name recognition or deception. So I famously refer to him as the fake Joe Rivera. But during the campaign, the crisis of democratic participation struck me. You know, when I would knock on people's doors, I often had people tell me in the 30 or 40 years I've been living in this neighborhood, I've never had an elected official or candidate for public office knock on my door. You know, we've had assembly members in my district who were arrested for bribery. One of them had to resign after wiretapping his colleagues. I've had 2 state senators who are in prison for stealing from the public treasury. We've had political dynasties in the Bronx. And so I thought my youth would be a liability, but many people in my district saw my youth as a symbol of change. And in a district like mine, where there are about 160,000 residents, maybe 60,000 are registered Dems, but only 6,000 vote. And I was able to knock on about 6,000 doors. And so I was able to win on the strength of door-to-door grassroots campaigning. But it's unfortunate that only 6,000 people voted. There's a sense in which I feel unrepresentative of my district, because I was only voted into my position by 6,000 people. And that's not unique to me. That's true of, there's a sense in which just about every legislator is a stranger to his or her, most of her constituents. The average person essentially only knows the president, the governor, and the mayor, and everyone else is a stranger. And so I live the crisis of democratic participation every day.
So let me stay with you for a second, and then we'll go down the road this way and follow up on exactly that. And I mentioned that WNYC is doing a civic engagement survey where we're looking for the hurdles that people experience to get more politically engaged. For you, what beyond knocking on doors do you think it would take, or are you trying to do now that you're in office, to get people politically engaged who may not have been, as for whatever reason, spontaneously drawn to it as the people on the panel?
What would it take to engage beyond an existential threat to the republic?
Which is going to make people go, psh, and they're going to go back to watching wrestling.
I mean, it seems like, the trouble with campaigning is that, there are 160,000 people who live in the district. You cannot knock on every single one of those doors. And so you're naturally inclined to only knock on the doors of voters who are already engaged in the process, right? I think any attempt to mobilize new people to vote is seen as futile within the time constraints of a campaign. So I would not consider a campaign a vehicle for civic engagement.
Mm-hmm. So what might be?
I guess the question is, what is social media? I think it amazes me that we seem to be one hashtag away from inspiring a social movement, right? Whether it's the Me Too movement or Black Lives Matter, what might begin as a hashtag becomes a movement, and marches that might have taken months or years to organize can be organized overnight. Like the Civil Rights March had hundreds of thousands of people. The Women's March had millions of people across the country. The question for me is, are we in the midst of a civic renaissance? Or are these marches simply a reaction to a uniquely odious personality in the White House? And I'm not sure which is true, because even after the Donald Trump presidency, we had the lowest rate of voter participation in the most recent mayoral election. So that has been a challenge. I don't know of a magic bullet for solving the problem of civic disengagement.
Rebecca, same question?
There is I think she's a political analyst, her name is Hari Han, who describes a framework for political engagement. It's the 3 Ps. It's possible, probable, and powerful. One, possible, meaning how can we make it more possible for people to even register to vote? Is it electronic voting? Is it, is it mandatory that everybody must vote or they're fined? What are the ways, what are the ideas that we can talk about, that we can brainstorm to try to get more people even just to register to vote? Like you said, there are not enough people registered, and for somebody who's running for office to try to go out there and get even more people to register, it's crazy, it's difficult. You don't have enough time to do that as a candidate. So now let's say we get more people to register to vote. Now, what is the probability, once they're registered, that they actually will vote? What's going to motivate them to get them to vote? Is it going to be that it's easier to vote, you can vote electronically, or is it you want to vote because your candidate actually means something to you? Or is it because you've been taught from a very young age in grade school the importance of voting? I do not believe, and I come from a family of teachers, I do not believe that there is enough emphasis on, for our children to understand the importance of voting and what it means to be a United States citizen who's voting for your government officials and your government representatives. So now, once you get past that, it comes to the word powerful. How is your vote? Now you've registered to vote, and you've decided you are going to actually get out there and vote. What will make your vote powerful? How will you perceive your own vote? And how will the people, that you're electing, how will they look at you and your vote and how you voted? How will it matter? So I think that those are the 3 things that need to be considered when we discuss the power of political engagement, not only in the perspective of who the voter is, but also for the candidates. What's going to spur, more people like all of us and everybody here in this audience? I'm sure there's people in this audience that are thinking about running for office one day. I would like to hope so. And what's going to do it for you? What's going to give you the impetus to get out there, really take the chance and go out on a limb and put yourself out there and stand for what you believe in and try to help the people that need the help? What's going to do it for you? What's going to give you that power and make you want to do it? So that's where I come from.
Thank you. DeNora, maybe you can talk about it from the perspective of engaging kids with civics education, which is something that I think a lot of people think is dying on the vine in education. So how are you finding that it can be done in a way that actually gets kids to do something other than ask what's on the test?
Great question. And I would say I'll start with a startling statistic. 1/3 of young people who were born after 1980 believe it's essential to live in a democracy. 1/3. So my question to them is, what kind of system of government do we want to live under? And so that's where civics education comes in. I like what the council member said, we're having a civic renaissance. I've been calling it a civic reckoning. I think we are being called to the carpet on how our government is functioning. And so civics education is a solution to that root cause of the problem of lack of participation. And so that's what we're doing at Generation Citizen, right? We are partnering with schools to implement action civics because we know the young people in a 21st century democracy, when they can like and hug and retweet things on the internet, don't want to memorize random government facts. They don't want a civics test, right? So lots of states are in the business right now of passing citizenship tests. That's great. But what do you do with that information after you memorize it? Nothing. It's an idea up on a shelf. And so our curriculum is action-oriented and project-based. We're going into classrooms and we're teaching young people that their voice actually does matter. One of our students, by the name of Ritchie, is a first-generation Pakistani immigrant. And she said, when she started the class, right, because there's a state-mandated participation in government that all students have to take before they graduate. She started the semester and she's like, why are they here? What's this? Okay, I'm a first semester senior. We all know what that's like. They've got SATs, college applications, other things they're thinking about. They're not thinking about citizenship and the responsibility of government and engaging with it. And so she kind of went to sleep on Generation Citizen. She was skeptical of why we were there. And then she heard her college volunteer who was in the classroom, we call them democracy coaches, talk to her about her ability to affect change on an issue she cared about. And so then the class starts debating. They're building consensus, right? A novel concept. Americans don't actually talk across divide. So if I don't like what Brette has to say on Facebook, I'm like, unfriend, she's out of here. Well, guess what, right? That's not actually how the founders started this conversation. They debated for hours, days, years to get to consensus about the governing document and everything thereafter. And so in our classrooms, our young people are doing that. They're building consensus and drilling down to one issue they care about. And in Ruba's classroom, it was the Mike Brown bill that would actually require police officers to wear body cameras. And when Ruba, and these are her own words, she said, when I realized that I could call an elected official and that it was their responsibility to take my call, civics was no longer a laughing matter. My job is to make sure that every young person in New York City, but also nationwide, knows that civics is not a laughing matter, that their voice can be heard, and that they can affect change on issues that matter to them in their community.
Thank you. Brette.
So I think there's no, to the councilman's point, I don't even know that there's one silver bullet. I think that what brought us to this moment, I call it the Great Awakening. I think that's my term for it when I'm on the road. There were many points that for a long time colluded to bring us to where we are in this conversation in our nation, in our city and state. And so it's going to take many aspects, many pressure points, many conversations to bring us out of this and to keep those conversations going. So at Eleanor's legacy, and definitely education, why the reason I like Great Awakening is it feels like we're waking up to what's happening in our country. At Eleanor's legacy, we've held in 2017 11 campaign schools around the state for women to learn sort of nuts and bolts of campaigning and understand how their political process works at the state and local level. And that was quadruple the number we had held the year before. I was at the Javits Center on election night and in 2006, and I thought, well, I guess it's time to start looking for a new job because this future is not possible. Why would anyone ever want to go down this road, man or a woman? And noon the next day was the first email I received from a woman saying, I've had enough. I want to have a cup of coffee and learn about how to plan my path to run for office someday and at a minimum to get more civically engaged. And it hasn't stopped since. And I think that it's those cups of coffee. I think it's the door knocking. And I think it's the one-on-one conversations that DeNora talked about that they conduct with their democracy coaches and Generation Citizen. It's that person that you trust and person that you admire and person who, that can come and sort of inform you about and sort of bring you along. I often talk about politics. It feels like a merry-go-round. And a lot of us have been on it for a long time, firmly rooted. We know how to hold on every budget cycle, every election cycle. We've got our place. And there's somebody waiting for their turn, and they think, well, when it stops, then I'll get on. And it never stops, right? There's always the next campaign. And in New York State, I think we voted 6 times already this year, right? If you count all the different special elections that are happening. And so it's up to us who are in this room on one of the most beautiful evenings of the year and have decided to spend it inside together to reach that hand out and to have that conversation to bring somebody along. We do it through campaign schools, through Generation Citizen, through the councilman, through his, I'm sure he has had umpteen town hall meetings across his district, all of these opportunities that we sort of provide for people to come in and join us.
Thank you. So, who has a question for our panel? Yes.
So, in some issue, one issue that's been a big, glaring issue in our time has been the issue of reapportionment and gerrymandering. And the issue of reapportionment and gerrymandering that everybody's doing. And how do you think issues like that have affected people's willingness to want to vote if they don't feel like, they feel like their representative is just placed in power by reapportionment or by gerrymandering to create a district that's aligned with one party over another? Actually, specifically to you, Mr. Councilman, do you feel...
Maybe settle.
But specifically to you, do you feel like you are just as likely or just as willing, and if not you specifically than some of your peers, do you feel like you're just as willing to take lead from somebody who is not within your party, who is definitely not going to vote for you, but will even matter in the long run, this is really strong? Do you feel like you want to engage that kind of citizen?
It's a tough question.
What kind of citizen?
If you want to engage with a citizen who is not politically aligned with you, who will probably actively vote against you, even though you know that his vote will not matter to you.
The politically correct answer is I engage with everybody, but to your point, I mean, it depends on, because it depends on your civic power, right? If you are a constituent who has a proven ability to mobilize a substantial number of my constituents, then that's obviously going to catch my attention. So it depends on your ability to organize. But I try to be as accessible as I can to my constituents. I obviously cannot know each of the 160,000 people I represent. But I think there's a small subset of those 160,000 who participate consistently in all the precinct councils and all the civic associations and all the community board meetings. But I think I think your point about gerrymandering is well taken. I just worry that we can always use cynicism as an excuse for disengaging from politics. And I actually find that the statutory and structural barriers to voting are sometimes overstated. Like in my district, there's no shortage of voter registration. The problem is that very few of the people who are registered to vote actually do vote and vote habitually. Right? We have the same exact laws in place, but what is a 5% turnout rate in an assembly race becomes a 50% turnout rate in a presidential race. We have the same laws in place. I think the trouble is more cultural than structural. That we live in a political culture that devalues civic engagement, right? In classical Greece, the quality of one's life was bound to the quality of one's citizenship. We live in a society where voting and civic engagement are seen as luxuries or even something to be avoided. We associate politics with corruption, something to be avoided at all costs. It's ironic, it's often said that voters despise Congress in the abstract, but then have a high opinion of their local congressman. So I think ultimately the problem is cultural, and we often use cynicism as an excuse to legitimize our disengagement.
But are you blaming individuals for something that might be more of a systemic or structural problem? Like, if people are voting for presidential, they might feel like there's something at stake there, whereas they may not see the direct connection to their lives, whether you or another Democrat from the Bronx represents them in city council.
I agree with the lack of information is symptomatic of disengagement. There's more to engagement than voting. It's about, you have to be an informed citizen. You have to know the various levels of government and the jurisdiction of each level. And one of the problems is that we fail to teach civics. We'll teach the First Amendment, but we don't actually teach students how to petition their elected officials in practice, how to express their opinions in the public square. There's no real commitment to cultivating informed, engaged citizenship.
Let me just add something. There are, and I know we all know people like this, whatever party you're at, if you decide to vote, you go into the voting booth and all you do is just check straight down the line. Many people aren't even looking to see the names or care who the names are. They're a Republican, they go Republican. They're Democrat, they go Democrat. And it should be, I think that the tide should change in the sense that we should be voting the candidate, not the party. Because the candidate is supposed to be the person that represents you and your needs and who you are. And whether that candidate, it's important to try to talk to the candidate or really do some homework before you vote. There are too many people that just go in and vote the party line and that's it.
Right.
And I think that's very harmful.
So I wanted to the question about gerrymandering and does my vote count? Does it matter? And what I would respond is with a story and bring it back again to the local level that Andrea Stewart-Cousins is a woman poised to become a leader of the New York State Senate if I do my job with my allies over the next couple months. And she ran her first race for state Senate and lost by 18 votes against an 18-year incumbent. And she stayed in the game and ran again 2 years later and won, ousted him, and now she's stand to make history for New York State women. 18 votes is a difference that people can make. That's so tangible. So I think if somebody expresses that cynicism, if somebody says it doesn't matter, I think we can counter, all of us up here could probably counter with a real life story of real life change. And tied to that, also again, expanding beyond voting, right? So it's a great opportunity to have another conversation. Like gerrymandering is a real threat to our democracy, but guess what's coming? The 2020 census. And do you know what happens with the 2020 census? Is that we figure out where people live and how many people live in our state. And what's tied to that is redistricting and gerrymandering. And that's what happens in our New York State Senate. And so there's a lot of, I might not be the most fun person at a bar, I'm realizing, or at a cocktail party. But I'd be happy to, and happy to have those conversations and tell those stories about these things really matter, and people really do have the power. We are living in a culture that tells us that we don't. We're living in a culture that tells us that government doesn't matter. That we are living in a late stage capitalism, and we're told that that's what's important.
Who else has a question? Sir.
The Independent Citizens Union for hosting this event at WNYC for organizing it and your insights and panelists. We've talked about the urgent need for civic preparation and civic engagement. We've talked about the fact that they are looking more to be prepared properly. We've talked about the aspiration of a more democratic society. What we haven't talked about yet is the constitutional right in the New York State's Constitution, the candidate likely lawsuit, to adequate civic preparation in all of our public schools around the state. Young people have the right to be prepared as informed voters and to be prepared for effective jury service. And so there's actually a constitutional framework for this. I'm wondering if the panel can speak to the possibility of using the law, our state constitution as a lever, to ensure that all of our young people have access to preparation for effective civic participation.
DeNora, as an educator, would you take that?
I was like, Joe, come on. No, I think Joe's absolutely right. So we had the great pleasure of hosting a conference a couple weeks ago with the Center for Educational Equity up at Teachers College, University, where Joe is from. And that's what we want to do, is actually reinvigorate this conversation around civics. So while it might have been, I don't know, a year ago that you were like the dud at the bar, civics is hot, democracy is sexy, so you should just hang out there at the bar and hang with your friends. That's what I do at home. My family's like, enough with the civics. Even my 7-year-old's like, enough with the civics, Mom. But Joe is right? So even as we think about how best to engage in this discussion, it isn't just about the practitioner side of the work. It isn't just about policy. It is about this constitutionally enshrined work, right, that is in our Constitution in New York, and we don't all know that, right? So the lawyer in me is excited for the opportunity to partner with CEE and make sure that we're using a rights-based framework for this, but we also need partners in government like Councilmember Torres and at the state level to make sure that we don't have to go that route, right? That we're actually going to use the policy framework instead of the courts. We all know how the Campaign for Fiscal Equity, thanks to the leadership of CE, has played out, and that we are still fighting for equitable funding here in New York City for our schools. On the one hand, we spend the most money out of any jurisdiction nationwide for educating public school students. On the other hand, we still are not spending enough, and we're not getting our fair share under the state lawsuit that requires us to do more. And so we need to make sure that we're lifting up all the tools in the toolbox to ensure that young people are getting effective civics education in the classrooms, and I'm looking forward to marshaling an army along with CE to do that.
We have time for one more. I guess back there. No, you who turned around. Yeah.
Oh, maybe. So I just want to come back to participation, because I think gerrymandering only works where there's no participation. I think even if you teach people about civics, as a gentleman that mentioned, even if you teach them about it, the fact is there are a lot of informed people out there who are still not showing up and participating in elections. In fact, an example is when I was campaigning with Carson in Philadelphia for Barack Obama, and spoke to a guy up front at the door, and he said, "Oh, you know what? Let me interrupt you there right now. I don't vote." And I said, "Oh, but you're registered to vote." He said, "I don't vote." I said, "But sir, is it a school across the street from your house? That's the polling station. All you have to do is walk across the street." He was like, "Yeah, I don't vote." And I said, "Okay, fine." But eventually gave up. How do you get people to participate? We understand the problem, but I need well, but he didn't really want to talk to them. So it's really more about answering the what's in it for me, why do I need to be there? Because for all of us in this room, it's pretty damn obvious. But how do you get those apathetic folks to the polls?
So I think part of it is we have to remember that civic participation is a spectrum of activities. So we as Americans, for some reason, pretend that we live in a society where we coordinate our leaders. So we elect them, we say good luck, see you in however many years, and then we don't engage with them, right? You're gonna think I'm silly, but that's the democracy nerd to me. Democracy is a full contact sport. So we need to engage with democracy all the time. At Generation Citizen, we have this toolkit that we put out a couple years ago called Go Beyond the Ballot. So I don't want us only talking about voting as the one way that we are civically engaged. So we do that every time there's an election. And if someone knocks on my door, like Councilmember Torres, maybe I'm inspired and I go vote. It is a spectrum of activity. It's everything from voting to lobbying a decision maker, to going to a political gathering, to organizing in your community. And so Councilmember Torres talked a lot about social media and its ability to catalyze movements. I'm inspired by that, but I also want us to know that we can't be slack with this. So we can't just go on the internet and like something and thought, well, I liked it, so I did my part. You actually have to knock those doors, you have to walk in those streets, you have to call up Councilmember Torres' office, I'm sorry, and you have to make your voice heard. And I think until we all start doing that, right, the work that I'm doing in the classroom of Generation Citizen isn't gonna make a difference, nor is it gonna make a difference if we get rid of all the structural barriers to participation. We have to do all of those things and actually engage in the full contact sport.
Having run twice. The first time that I ran, it was during the presidential election. I am the Republican on the panel up here. And I got almost 38% of the vote, I believe it was, which was the highest in 17 years for my district for a Republican to get. I think Donald Trump got about 6,000 votes and I had 18,000 votes, which means that 12,000 Democrats voted for Hillary Clinton and then crossed over and voted for me. Now, this is not I'm not saying this for bragging reasons whatsoever. It's not the point. The point is I think the question the gentleman asked was, how do you get people who say that they don't vote or they'll never vote for the other party even to vote for you? Right, or because people aren't active. It's listening. You've got 2 ears, and if you're a candidate, you have to listen. You have to listen to what they're saying. You have to, and I did. And I took hundreds and hundreds, maybe thousands of names, addresses, and phone numbers of people right on the street and gave them my card and said, when I win, call me. Here's my number. Call me. As soon as I win, I can help you because you're being thrown out of your apartment or you're not getting enough money for this or whatever the reason was. Call me, I'm going to help you. I'm going to work as hard as I can on your behalf. That's what I want to do, and that's why I'm doing this. And when you talk to people like that, I think when voters or potential voters understand that the people that are running for office and the people that are in office are the ones that are there because of the voters, because of their constituents, those are the ones that are going to get votes. Those are the people that are going to really, in the end, make a difference on behalf of the voters and not just on behalf of the party. And that's my 2 cents.
Okay, and I would say it's repetition, right? It's constantly going back to the basics of repping your block, of explaining extolling the virtues of joining community boards, and of constantly going back to that person in a diplomatic way to plant the seed and know it'll take a while. It took us a long time to get to this point of the Great Awakening, of the civic renaissance, the civic reckoning, and we're not there yet, and we need to keep it up. And so it's, again, on all of us here to know that it's always just going back to the basics again and again and again, to repeat the lesson until it's learned, and then to start with that next person who just woke up, who just entered the Renaissance and said, oh yeah, right, I meant to be doing this all along too. And we're there ready, ever optimistic, ever grateful for their participation.
Councilman, you want a last word and then we're going to be out of time.
Although if civic engagement depends on a provocation like the Donald Trump presidency, I think we're in trouble. So the question is,
I think you have the last word.
how do we become civically engaged in the absence of an existential threat to the republic? I'm going to reinforce a point that I said earlier. I think learning civic virtue is a little like learning a language. The best time to do it is when you're young. Yes. But it's not something that comes naturally to people. You have to instill it in the most formative years of someone's life so that it's a habit that remains with you for the rest of your life. That to me is the best hope for cultivating a culture of civic engagement. You cannot depend on provocations like Donald Trump to activate a new generation of Americans or New Yorkers. I think the best hope lies in culture, but I prefer the term civic virtue to civic engagement, because I find not every form of civic engagement serves the public good, right? You know, the mass hysteria against shelter sightings and school rezonings and affordable housing development, it's a form of civic engagement, but it's hardly the kind that serves the public good. Or we've seen the proliferation of hate groups and neo-Nazi groups, or what I would say is an assault on free speech in academia. I worry about retrograde forms of civic engagement. So I believe in civic virtue.
Well, please thank our panel.
Hello, everyone. I'm Greg Silver. I'm a Citizens Union board member and a co-chair of the event tonight. I first want to thank Brian for an amazing job. Brian, it was a special treat to see you as well as hear you. I want to thank the panel members for an incredibly thoughtful discussion and for being the kind of active and engaged citizens that our city, state, and country so desperately need, especially now in these dark times. So thank you very much. I think this discussion underscores for me why I became involved in Citizens Union and why you should be involved too. Citizens Union is a practical and principled organization that unclogs the arteries of our democracy. I think probably everybody in this room would agree that we can do better than we're doing right now with government. I think one thing that Citizens Union has taught me over the years, and that was reaffirmed today, is that no matter how good the policies are and how good the candidates are, if the basic fundamentals of democracy are broken, you will get a bad outcome. And right now, you know, we have lots of good ideas, we have bad outcomes. And I think the reason is that we need, you know, more people to be more involved, paying more attention, spending more time and more energy on just making democracy work. That's true for Democrats, it's true for Republicans. And so I want to thank you guys very, very much. If you will stand up, we have some highly coveted glass apples that we're going to give to you as tokens. So thank you guys very much. Thank you, all of you, for coming, for giving us your time and attention tonight. I hope you will stay. I hope you will take advantage of the open bar and schmooze and look around at the lovely view. And we're very glad that you could make it here tonight, and we hope we will see you again. Thank you very much.
What did you think? You guys have been great. You guys have been great. Just